I had just finished making this elastic waist tiered skirt and realized I needed a little bit better top to go with it than the t-shirt top that I originally made. I had leftover of this fabric, but not enough to do a whole top. But in my stash, I did have this cute stripe and this solid. That's when I remembered the Quinn Woven top by StyleARC that I made a few months ago from Quilting Squares. Because this pattern uses multiple fabric sections, it gave me the flexibility to mix in coordinating fabrics and make the perfect top to go with my tiered skirt. Hi, I'm Emily with Threaded Journey, and let's get started. All the pattern pieces are made to be cut on the front side of the fabric. Horizontal seam binding and the neck binding to cut on the bias. This one you can cut on the bias if you want to, or it could just be straight, depends on the pattern that you're using. I do like that it has this stripe direction, so it makes it easy to cut on the bias if you are using a stripe. All right, my pieces are set out. Make sure that you have them going the right direction, that your grain line is going the same direction. The back has a higher neck, so it does kind of look a little funny. And I'm just going to cut these pieces out. Horizontal seam binding piece is completely optional, and you can do it however you would like. So I could do it where my stripes are straight. I can cut it on the bias where my stripes are diagonal. I could use the solid piece. I could use the floral piece. I'm going to go with the solid and do the diagonal stripe. The first step is to sew the side seam of these two panel pieces right along here, and just be aware that this little mark right here, that's where you're going to fold it ultimately to hem your sleeve. So just be aware of that as you're sewing. I've serged them right here. I've pressed my seam allowance to the back and just kind of made that so that it's a straight line. And I'm setting that aside. To my horizontal seam bind cut, and I have just folded it in half. Now for these, make sure that when you're stitching these together, you stitch them together correctly. Curved sides together. The longer piece is my back, so I'm just going to put a little clip so that I know that's my back piece, even though it's pretty obvious, but just as a reminder. And I'm going to stitch. All right, I have my lower front and back pieces, and I also have my stripe here. I made a little crease. I wanted that crease right there to help me when I'm matching up my top with my back. So I'm just gonna kind of pin a few little places here. I could stay stitch this, but I think this will be just fine. I'm just gonna put a few little pins in here just to keep it in place. I've got my top piece here, and I have my stitch line right there, and I'm going to line it up with that crease that I made so that my seams are matched up. Then I'm going to just work my way out, lining all three pieces up. Have it clipped, but before I continue on to sewing, I'm going to just make sure that it is even on both sides, looks good, and then I'm just going to stitch. All right, it's all stitched together. I serged it, and then I came back and top stitched it, not a have to. I just wanted that seam allowance to stay in place and not be a problem. I also trimmed off and made each side a straight line. And it is a little bit wonky here because we still have to sew that together. So don't worry about that yet. We have a straight line and a straight line. All right, my front piece is to my front piece. Just make sure that you actually do the front to the front and the back to the back. It should line up at the neck. All right, both sides are stitched together, pressed and serged. We're going to stitch, and now our shirt looks like this. All right, now I'm just gonna stitch my shoulder seams. All right, I have my neck binding cut on the bias, and I'm going to stitch right here, and then I'm going to fold it in half. My neck binding is done, and I've made a crease at the halfway point, and I've also made a crease at the half front and the half back. And then we are going to clip this in. Let's start at the back. If you follow the directions for the neck binding, it says to pin it to the wrong side. You're going to stitch, then you're going to fold it over, and you're going to stitch, and that way your binding shows. Here's my problem with that, is you have to sew super, super nice. And super even and all of that, and catch just barely this edge and all the things. And yes, it will look cute, but you can also make it a little bit easier on yourself and pin it to the right side, stitch it, fold it over, and it hides completely. So it's hidden. That's how I did this one. I hid it completely. To stitch that where it shows is doable, but I think it looks nicer just to have it hidden and it top stitched. So that is what I'm going to do with mine. The band and the shirt are a 1-to-1 ratio. So you shouldn't have really any trouble getting it in. If you need to stretch it just a smidge, the bias binding will stretch just a little bit. If you're having any kind of little trouble there, just make sure that you are not stretching the neckline of your fabric. You are stretching only the bias binding. This is unlike the directions. We are pinning it to the right side instead of the wrong side, and that'll make it where when it's finished, the binding does not show. Now that I have the binding stitched in, I'm just going to fold it. Make sure you're pressing it very carefully so that it does not show on the top. And then I'm going to top stitch, and I am definitely going to stitch it from the top, making sure that none of that rolls so that you don't see it. Let's stitch. All right, it's time for sleeves, and we're just gonna roll it under and stitch. So cute. Love it. Hemmed it. I just did a 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. That was a 1 inch hem was what was on the pattern. So I just did a roll there. Sleeve, I just turned it up the 1/2 inch. I didn't try to double roll it, so I'd serged it first. And neck, I don't have the binding on the outside. I just think that looks nicer. So fun. Love it.